After 23 years of watching people do exactly what they were told, I moved my position entirely. Let me back up. Because what I am about to share with you in the next 40 minutes is not a contrarian opinion. It is not a hot take designed to make you angry. It is a documented, mathematical reality that has been sitting in plain sight for nearly 5 decades, while tens of millions of American workers quietly handed their financial futures to a system that was never designed with their freedom in mind. I want you to think about something for a moment. You have probably been told, by your HR department, by your parents, by every magazine cover in every doctor's waiting room you have ever sat in, that the single most important thing you can do for your retirement is max out your 401k. And if you followed that advice, I need you to understand something right now, before this video goes another 10 seconds. You did not make a mistake because you were careless. You made a mistake because you trusted people who had a financial incentive to give you that advice. And there is a profound difference between those two things. Here is the question I want you to sit with for the next 40 minutes. Not just intellectually, I want it to land somewhere deeper than that. I want it to land in the part of you that has worked hard, saved diligently, deferred gratification, done everything right, and yet still wonders, quietly, whether the finish line is actually where they told you it was. What if the retirement account you have been faithfully contributing to, the one sitting in your brokerage portal right now, the one you check after every market swing, what if that account was specifically designed, not to maximize your wealth, but to maximize someone else's? What if the very structure of that account, the rules, the locks, the fees buried in documents you were never encouraged to read, were engineered by a coalition of mutual fund executives and corporate lobbyists in 1978, specifically to solve their tax problem, not yours? Now, before anyone reaches for the comments section, let me be precise. I am not here to tell you the 401k is evil. I am not here to tell you to withdraw everything tomorrow morning. What I am here to do, with data, with history, and with the exact mathematical models used by the wealthiest families in this country, is show you the full picture. Because for the last 47 years, you have only been shown half of it. And once you see the complete picture, once you understand what business owners, physicians, attorneys, and multi-generational wealth families actually do with their capital, you will never look at that HR enrollment form the same way again. This is not theory. This is not speculation. This is the architecture of American wealth, and you were simply never invited to the room where it was explained. Stay with me. Because in the next 40 minutes, I am going to walk you through every layer of this system, the history, the math, the alternatives, and the exact action plan by income bracket, so that by the time this video ends, you will have more clarity about your retirement strategy than most people accumulate in a lifetime of financial advising. One thing before we continue. Everything in this video is for educational purposes only. I am not your financial advisor. I am not your CPA. Before making any changes to your retirement accounts, sit down with a licensed professional who knows your specific numbers. What I can give you is the framework. The decisions, those belong to you. Now, let us begin at the very beginning. Because the story of the 401k does not start with your paycheck. It starts with a footnote in a tax bill that almost nobody read. The year is 1978. America is in the grip of stagflation, a word that sounds academic until you understand what it actually means in a household. It means prices are rising at double digits while the economy is barely moving. It means your salary went up 4% and everything you buy went up 12%. It means the purchasing power of every dollar sitting in your savings account is quietly being consumed, not dramatically, not all at once, but steadily, invisibly, like rust on iron. Congress is rewriting the tax code. And buried inside the Revenue Act of 1978, between provisions nobody outside a corporate tax attorney's office would ever read, is a small, seemingly technical clause. Section 401, Paragraph K. It was not designed to replace pensions. That is critical for you to understand. It was designed as a supplemental benefit, a way to allow highly compensated executives at large corporations to defer a portion of their bonuses, sheltered from immediate taxation. It was, in its original architecture, a wealthy man's tax deferral vehicle. The pension was supposed to remain the foundation of the American workers' retirement security. The 401k was an addendum. A footnote. An executive perk. But then something happened. In the early 1980s, a benefits consultant named Ted Benna, who has since been called the father of the 401k, found a creative interpretation of that clause and convinced his employer to let him use it for rank-and-file employees. What began as a narrow tax provision for senior executives suddenly became available to every payroll employee in America. And the mutual fund industry recognized, almost immediately, what this meant. Think about what was just handed to them. Tens of millions of American workers, people who had previously had no relationship with financial markets, were now going to be enrolled, automatically, in investment plans managed by fund companies who charged annual fees for the privilege. The workers were going to contribute a portion of every paycheck. The contributions were going to compound over decades. And for every dollar in those accounts, a small but persistent percentage was going to flow, quietly, legally, perpetually, to the plan administrators, the fund managers, and the custodians. The Harvard Business School has documented this shift extensively. What emerged in the 1980s and 1990s was not an organic expansion of American retirement security. It was the systematic dismantling of the defined benefit pension, in which employers bore the investment risk, and its replacement with the defined contribution model, in which you bear all of the risk, and the financial industry collects all of the fees. Your employer did not make this transition because it was better for you. They made it because it was dramatically cheaper for them. The math is not ambiguous. A company that sponsors a pension plan carries that liability on its balance sheet indefinitely. A company that offers a 401k match, often capped at 3 to 4%, transfers the investment risk entirely onto the employee, while converting a long-term liability into a predictable annual expense. This is not a conspiracy. It is standard corporate financial engineering. And it is the first layer of the structure you need to understand. Now, here is where the mathematics become personal. The average 401k plan in America charges a total annual fee, including the expense ratios on the underlying mutual funds, the plan administration fee, and in some cases an advisory fee, of somewhere between 0.5 and 1.5% per year. That sounds like a rounding error. It is not. Let us run the actual numbers. Because the financial industry has been very careful to present fees to you as percentages, and there is a reason for that. Percentages feel abstract. Dollars do not. If you have $200,000 in your 401k today, and your plan charges a total annual fee of 0.85%, you are paying $1,700 per year in fees. Not in investment losses. Not in taxes. In fees. To strangers. For the privilege of holding your own money in an account with your name on it. Over 30 years, assuming that $200,000 compounds at a reasonable historical rate of 7%, the difference between paying those fees and not paying them is not $51,000. It is not even $80,000. It is $138,000 or more. Gone. Not to volatility. Not to inflation. To management fees that compounded just as aggressively as your principal did, just in the wrong direction. A landmark Vanguard research study demonstrated that every additional 1% in annual fees reduces your terminal wealth by approximately 17% over a 30-year investment horizon. 17% of a retirement nest egg is not a rounding error. For the average American household, that is several years of living expenses, quietly extracted, dollar by dollar, year by year, from an account you were told was working for you. And most people have never read the fee disclosure document. It exists. It is legally required to exist. It is buried in the plan documents your HR department provided during your first week of work. Most people signed the enrollment form without reading page 47. I know this because the financial industry designed the enrollment process that way, and now. Here is the dimension of this system that almost no one discusses clearly. The 401k does not just cost you in fees. It costs you in control. There is a concept in finance called liquidity, and it is one of the most underrated dimensions of wealth. Liquid wealth is wealth you can access. Illiquid wealth is wealth that exists on paper, a number on a screen, that you cannot touch without penalty, without tax consequence, without navigating a bureaucratic process that was specifically designed to discourage you from ever attempting it. Your 401k balance is, for most of your working life, illiquid wealth. The Internal Revenue Code imposes a 10% early withdrawal penalty on any distributions taken before the age of 59 and a half. That is before ordinary income tax, which will take another 22 to 37% depending on your bracket. So if you experience a genuine financial emergency at age 45, a medical event, a business opportunity, a family crisis, and you attempt to access $50,000 from your 401k, you will pay somewhere between $16,000 and $23,000 in immediate penalties and taxes to access your own money. Real wealth is not just the accumulation of assets. Real wealth is the freedom to deploy your capital at the moment of your choosing, for the purpose you determine, without asking permission from a tax code written in 1978. And this is where we begin to see the divergence, the profound, compounding divergence, between how the middle class builds wealth and how the wealthy build wealth. I want to be precise about something, because this is the moment in the video where the true framework emerges. I am not about to tell you that wealthy people do not use tax-advantaged accounts. Many do. What I am going to show you is that they never rely exclusively on any single vehicle, and they specifically prioritize one dimension of wealth that the 401k systematically destroys. That dimension is optionality. The ability to pivot. The ability to capitalize on an asymmetric opportunity when it appears. The ability to access your capital in the year it matters most, which is rarely the year you turn 59 and a half. A physician friend once described it to me this way. He said, "Imagine you have spent 30 years storing all of your emergency equipment in a warehouse 40 miles from your house, under a padlock that takes 6 months to open, and every time you open it, someone charges you a substantial toll. That is not a safety net. That is an inconvenience dressed up as security." The 401k is extraordinarily good at one thing, deferring your tax liability into the future. But it defers it into a future where tax rates may be higher, where your healthcare costs are certainly higher, where your ability to respond to life's unpredictability is structurally limited. Now let me ask you something directly. When you enrolled in your 401k, did your HR department explain the fee structure in dollars? Did they show you a 30-year projection of what those fees would cost you in real dollar terms? Did they explain that your account would be locked until you were nearly 60, and that accessing it early would trigger a combined penalty rate that could exceed 40%? Did they present you with any alternatives? Or did they hand you a form, point to the employer match, and tell you to sign by Friday? I am not assigning malice here. Most HR professionals are not financial advisors. They are administering a benefit that was handed to them. But the system they are administering was designed, from the lobbying stage to the enrollment form, to move assets under management as efficiently as possible. And the people who moved those assets, the fund managers, the plan custodians, the administrators, they built extraordinary wealth doing it. With your money. At your expense. With your signature on the enrollment form. So the question you should be sitting with right now is not, should I panic? The question is, what did the people who designed this system actually do with their own money? Because it was not this. Now, before we go further, I need to address the single most powerful argument in defense of the 401k. Because if I do not address it directly, everything else I say will be filtered through that objection. The employer match. You have heard it 1,000 times, the employer match is free money. Do not leave free money on the table. And on its face, this is correct. If your employer matches 50 cents on every dollar up to 6% of your salary, you are receiving an immediate, guaranteed 50% return on that specific contribution. That is real. That is legitimate. And I am not here to tell you to walk away from it. Here is the distinction that matters, and it is the distinction that changes everything. The employer match is not an argument for the 401k as a primary wealth-building vehicle. It is an argument for contributing to the match threshold, and not a single dollar beyond it. The point at which you exhaust your employer match is the exact point at which the 401k's advantages begin to compete directly against more flexible, more accessible, more strategically powerful alternatives. And in many cases, depending on your tax situation, your age, your income level, and your financial goals, it loses that competition. The financial industry does not want you to make that distinction. Because the moment you make it, you stop sending them money beyond the match, and that is precisely the money on which their fee engine runs most profitably. Now let us talk about something that the behavioral economists call the sunk cost effect. Millions of Americans have been contributing to a 401k for 5, 10, 20 years. The balance is real. The contributions were real. And when someone introduces the idea that the vehicle itself might not be optimal, the brain does something predictable: it conflates the value of the money with the validity of the strategy that produced it. In other words, because you have $180,000 in your 401k, because you worked hard to put it there, because watching it grow has given you a sense of security, your brain experiences any critique of the 401k as a critique of the decisions that led to that balance. But the money and the vehicle are separate things. The discipline you demonstrated in saving was the asset. The container you put it in is a separate question, and it is always a question worth revisiting, regardless of how long you have been using it. Here is the data point that should recalibrate this. Research from the Federal Reserve Survey of Consumer Finances, one of the most comprehensive longitudinal studies of American household wealth ever conducted, consistently shows that the wealthiest quartile of American households does not achieve its wealth primarily through 401k accumulation. The primary drivers of wealth in the top quartile are business ownership, real estate equity, and taxable investment accounts with broad liquidity. The 401k appears in these portfolios, but as a component, not as the foundation. The households in the second and third wealth quartiles, what we broadly think of as the upper middle class, are, statistically, the most heavily concentrated in 401k assets relative to their total net worth. Which is to say, the people most dependent on the 401k as their primary retirement vehicle are precisely the people for whom its limitations are most consequential. This is not an accident. It is the predictable outcome of a system in which financial complexity is a form of gatekeeping, in which the tools available to the truly wealthy are simply never explained to the merely disciplined. And that changes today. Because in the next segment, I am going to show you exactly what the wealthy use instead. Not instead of the employer match, alongside it, above it, and beyond it. 3 vehicles. Each one solving a specific dimension that the 401k fails to address. And each one accessible, with the right framework, to someone starting with as little as $200 a month. Let us build the framework. I am going to describe 3 financial vehicles. And as I walk through each one, I want you to measure it against a single standard, the standard that the wealthiest Americans use when evaluating any financial tool. Does this give me tax advantage? Does this give me liquidity? Does this give me control? The 401k, as we have established, offers the first of those 3. It sacrifices the second. And it eliminates the third. The optimal wealth stack delivers all 3 simultaneously. Vehicle 1, the Roth IRA. This is not a secret. But the depth of its strategic value, compared to the 401k, is routinely understated in mainstream financial media. Here is the fundamental difference, stated plainly. The 401k is a pre-tax vehicle. You contribute before taxes, which reduces your taxable income today. But every dollar that comes out of that account in retirement, your principal and your gains, is taxed as ordinary income at whatever rate applies in the year you withdraw. You are not escaping taxes. You are deferring them into a future you cannot predict. The Roth IRA is an after-tax vehicle. You contribute dollars that have already been taxed. And every dollar of growth, every year of compounding, every market return accumulated over decades, comes out in retirement completely tax-free. Not tax-deferred. Tax-free. Now, consider what that distinction means in mathematical terms. If you are 35 years old today, and you contribute the maximum Roth IRA amount each year, currently $7,000 annually, for the next 30 years, and that money compounds at a historical average of 7% per year, you will have approximately $661,000 in that account at retirement. Every dollar of that $661,000, if you follow the rules, is tax-free. Zero federal income tax on withdrawal. None. Compare that to the same $661,000 in a traditional 401k. If your effective withdrawal rate in retirement is 22%, which is conservative for someone with a meaningful account balance, you are paying $145,000 in taxes on money that has already worked for you for 30 years. The Roth IRA also carries another advantage that is rarely discussed in the context of retirement planning: contribution flexibility. You can withdraw your Roth IRA contributions, not your gains, but your original contributions, at any time, at any age, without penalty and without tax. This is a structural liquidity feature that the 401k does not offer. It is not a loophole. It is the law. And it transforms the Roth IRA from a retirement account into something more powerful, a dual-purpose savings and investment vehicle. Everything in this video is for educational purposes only. I am not your financial advisor, and I strongly encourage you to consult a licensed professional before making any changes to your accounts. Now, Vehicle 2, the taxable brokerage account. This one surprises people. Because at first glance, a standard brokerage account does not appear to offer tax advantages, and compared to the Roth IRA and the 401k, it does not. What it offers instead is something the 401k structurally eliminates: absolute liquidity and complete control. There are no contribution limits. There are no age restrictions on withdrawal. There are no penalty structures. You can invest in virtually any publicly traded security, close a position tomorrow morning, and have the proceeds available in your bank account within 2 business days. For the wealthy, for the business owner, the high-income professional, the multi-generational family, this is not a secondary account. It is the primary engine of deployable capital. The tax treatment of a taxable brokerage account is also better than most people believe. Long-term capital gains, on assets held for more than 1 year, are taxed at rates of 0, 15, or 20%, depending on your income. For most middle-class households, that rate is 15%. Compare that to the ordinary income tax rate you will pay on every 401k distribution in retirement, which begins at 22% and rises from there. This means that for many Americans in the middle income brackets, a long-term taxable brokerage account generates better after-tax outcomes in retirement than a traditional 401k, without the lockup, without the fee drag, and without the dependency on a plan administrator's fund menu. Vehicle 3, Cash Value Life Insurance, specifically, the Indexed Universal Life Policy or Whole Life Insurance. Now, I want to be careful here, because this is the vehicle most frequently misrepresented in both directions. It is either presented as the solution to every financial problem, or dismissed as an insurance salesman's trick. Neither characterization is accurate. Here is the structural reality. Cash value life insurance, when designed correctly, by a qualified specialist, for the right individual at the right income level, is one of the most powerful tax-advantaged vehicles in the American Financial Code. Wealthy families have used it for over a century, not as a gimmick, but as a foundational component of their tax strategy. The core mechanics are straightforward. Commercial bank. The death benefit passes to your beneficiaries income tax-free. For someone in the upper income brackets, particularly someone who has already maxed their Roth IRA and is looking for additional tax-sheltered growth, a well-structured IUL or whole life policy can serve as a third tier of the wealth stack, providing tax-free income in retirement through policy loans, with no required minimum distributions, and no market exposure to the downside that a 401k participant must absorb silently every time the market corrects. 3 vehicles. 1 fundamental principle: tax advantage, liquidity, control. All 3 simultaneously. This is not the strategy of the fringe. This is the architecture of generational wealth. Before we move to the action plan, there is a 4th vehicle I need to address. Because it is, in the estimation of many advanced tax strategists, the single most powerful tax-advantaged account available to the American worker, and it is systematically ignored in mainstream financial planning. The Health Savings Account. The HSA. Most people think of the HSA the way their employer described it during benefits enrollment, as a way to set aside pre-tax money for doctor's visits and prescriptions. A convenience account. A minor benefit attached to a high-deductible health plan. That description is accurate as far as it goes. But it stops about 40% short of the full picture. Here is what your HR department did not tell you. The HSA is the only account in the American tax code that offers what tax professionals call the triple tax advantage. Your contributions go in pre-tax, just like a 401k. Your money grows tax-deferred, just like a 401k. And your withdrawals for qualified medical expenses come out completely tax-free, better than a 401k, which taxes every withdrawal at ordinary income rates. But here is the dimension that transforms the HSA from a reimbursement account into a strategic wealth vehicle. After the age of 65, HSA funds can be withdrawn for any purpose, not just medical expenses, and are simply taxed as ordinary income. Exactly the same tax treatment as a traditional IRA or 401k. Which means the HSA, in its worst-case scenario at retirement age, performs identically to your 401k. But in the scenario where you have accumulated significant medical expenses over your lifetime, and statistically, you will, because the average American couple retiring today is projected to need between $300,000 and $350,000 to cover out-of-pocket healthcare costs in retirement, every dollar you withdraw for those expenses is completely tax-free. Now add one more layer. Unlike a flexible spending account, HSA funds roll over indefinitely. They do not expire at the end of the year. They compound. They invest. They grow. And you can reimburse yourself for medical expenses years or even decades after you incurred them, as long as you kept the receipts. This means a sophisticated HSA user in their 30s can pay their current medical expenses out of pocket, save every receipt in a dedicated folder, and allow their HSA to compound untouched for 30 years, then withdraw the full accumulated balance, tax-free, by submitting 30 years of medical receipts. This is not a loophole. It is the explicit design of the account. The IRS has confirmed this strategy in writing. And yet the number of Americans who are aware of it and executing it could fit comfortably in a small conference room. The contribution limit for 2024 is $4,150 for an individual and $8,300 for a family, with an additional $1,000 catch-up contribution allowed after age 55. These are not large numbers, but compounded over 30 years, the tax savings they generate are substantial. Now, a critical qualifier, because precision matters here. The HSA is only available to individuals enrolled in a high-deductible health plan. Not every employer offers this option. Not every medical situation makes a high-deductible plan the right choice. This is exactly the kind of decision that requires a conversation with a qualified professional who understands your specific health history, your income, and your overall financial architecture. But if you are currently enrolled in an HSA-eligible plan and you are not maximizing your HSA contribution before contributing a dollar beyond your 401k employer match, you are leaving one of the most powerful tax tools in the American code completely unused. Now here is where we need to address something that I know some of you are already thinking. Because the strongest argument against everything I have laid out in this video is about to appear, and I want to deal with it directly, because doing so is the only intellectually honest way to present this analysis. The strongest argument for the 401k is the employer match. We have already addressed this: contribute to the match threshold, capture the guaranteed return, and not a dollar beyond without evaluating your alternatives. That is not an anti-401k position. That is a precision allocation position. The second strongest argument is the tax deduction on contributions. And this one deserves a more nuanced response. If you are in a high income tax bracket today, say, 32 or 37%, and you have a genuine expectation that your income in retirement will be substantially lower, then deferring taxes from a high-rate year into a lower-rate year is a mathematically rational strategy. The pre-tax 401k contribution makes sense in that specific scenario. The problem is that this scenario assumes two things that are increasingly uncertain. First, it assumes that tax rates in 30 years will be similar to or lower than tax rates today. Look at the trajectory of the U.S. national debt, which recently surpassed $34 trillion, and the long-term projections for entitlement spending. Many sophisticated tax strategists now argue that a reasonable base case assumption for future tax rates is higher, not lower. If that base case proves correct, you will have deferred taxes from a manageable rate today into a punishing rate in retirement. Second, it assumes you know what your retirement income will look like. For many people, a combination of Social Security, required minimum distributions from a 401k, rental income, and portfolio withdrawals can push retirement income into brackets that are not significantly different from their working years. The assumption that you will be in a lower bracket in retirement is not wrong, it is simply not guaranteed. The third objection is the mutual fund selection inside the Roth IRA versus the 401k. Some people note that their 401k offers institutional class funds with expense ratios of 0.04 or 0.05%, far lower than what they might access individually. This is true at some large employers. It is significantly less true at small and mid-size companies, where plan options tend to be limited to retail class funds with fees in the 0.5 to 1% range. But even in the best-case scenario, where your 401k offers the lowest possible fee structure, the lockup, the limited investment menu, and the tax liability at withdrawal remain structural constraints. And those constraints have real costs that do not appear in the fund's expense ratio. The fourth objection: what about the mega backdoor Roth? What about the after-tax 401k conversion? These are legitimate advanced strategies for individuals at specific income levels whose employers offer specific plan features. And yes, for those individuals, the 401k structure can be used in sophisticated ways that address some of the limitations I have described. But these strategies are available to a fraction of 401k participants, require active plan management that most employees never execute, and are precisely the kind of institutional knowledge that is available to the wealthy, and systematically unavailable to everyone else. Which is exactly the point. The financial system does not withhold these strategies because they are secrets. It withholds them because explaining them requires a level of personalized financial advice that a mutual fund company has no commercial incentive to provide. Now, let us talk about the freelancers and the self-employed. Because there is a version of this conversation that applies specifically to people who do not have access to a corporate 401k at all, and this group is growing dramatically in the American workforce. That if you are self-employed, if you run a business, if you work as a contractor, if you have a significant side income that you are not currently sheltering, then the calculus of this conversation is different in ways that are actually favorable to you. Because the self-employed individual has access to vehicles that the traditional employee does not. And those vehicles, properly structured, can generate tax advantages that dwarf what a corporate 401k provides. The solo 401k, sometimes called the individual 401k, is available to any self-employed individual with no full-time employees other than themselves and a spouse. It allows you to make contributions as both the employer and the employee, which produces an extraordinarily high contribution ceiling. In 2024, a self-employed individual under age 50 can contribute up to $69,000 per year to a solo 401k. Compare that to the $23,000 employee contribution limit on a corporate plan. For a high-earning freelancer or small business owner, this represents a tax-sheltering capacity that is almost impossible to replicate through any other single vehicle. The solo 401k can also be structured as a Roth vehicle, allowing after-tax contributions that grow and are withdrawn completely tax-free. And unlike the Roth IRA, there is no income limit on solo 401k Roth contributions. This makes it particularly valuable for high-income self-employed individuals who earn too much to contribute directly to a Roth IRA. The SEP IRA, Simplified Employee Pension, is another vehicle available to the self-employed. Its administration is simpler than the solo 401k, and for certain business structures, it may be more appropriate. The contribution limit is up to 25% of net self-employment income, capped at $69,000 in 2024. Both of these vehicles require a working relationship with a financial professional who understands self-employment tax structures. The decisions are not simple. But the opportunity they represent, for the growing segment of American workers who generate income outside of a traditional employer relationship, is one of the most underexplored areas in personal finance content today. Now, if you are currently 50 years of age or older, I want to speak to you directly for the next 2 minutes. Because the majority of financial content on this topic is written for a 35-year-old, and that age assumption has real consequences for the advice being given. If you are 50 or older, the tax code has a provision specifically for you, the catch-up contribution. For the 401k and solo 401k, the catch-up contribution allows an additional $7,500 per year in 2024, bringing the total employee contribution limit to $30,500. For the Roth IRA, the catch-up adds an additional $1,000, bringing the annual limit to $8,000. For the HSA, there is an additional $1,000 catch-up contribution after age 55. These numbers matter. Because if you are 50 years old and you begin executing an optimized multi-vehicle strategy today, Roth IRA maximized, HSA maximized, taxable brokerage funded, and the employer match captured, you have 15 years of compounding ahead of you. 15 years, with the catch-up contribution boost, executed with discipline and low-cost index funds, is not a lost cause. It is a genuine opportunity. The most destructive narrative in late-start retirement planning is the idea that the window has closed. It has not. What has changed is the margin for error. And that tighter margin is precisely why the vehicle selection decisions, the difference between a tax-deferred and a tax-free account, between a locked vehicle and a liquid one, matter more, not less, for the person who is beginning this analysis at 50. Let us make this concrete. Because one of the most consistent failures of financial education content is its tendency toward abstraction, toward general principles and directional advice that leaves the viewer precisely where they started, uncertain about what to actually do on Monday morning. I am going to build the action plan by income tier. And I want you to find your number and stay with me through this segment. Tier 1, annual household income under $50,000. At this income level, the mathematical priority is straightforward. Step 1. Contribute to your employer's 401k up to the precise threshold of the employer match, and stop there. Capture the guaranteed return. Extract the free money. Do not exceed the match by a single dollar until the next steps are completed. Step 2. Open a Roth IRA. In 2024, you can contribute up to $7,000 per year, roughly $583 per month, or $268 per biweekly paycheck. If that number is too large given your current budget, contribute what you can. The account structure is more important than the initial contribution amount. Time in the market, compounding inside a tax-free vehicle, is the asset. Step 3. If your employer offers an HSA-eligible health plan, maximize the HSA before contributing any discretionary savings elsewhere. The triple tax advantage makes this the highest priority dollar in your budget, dollar for dollar. For implementation, Fidelity offers both a Roth IRA and an HSA with zero account minimums and access to zero expense ratio index funds. This is not a commercial recommendation. It is a factual statement about account access at a major custodian. Your CPA or financial advisor can help you evaluate which platform fits your specific situation. Tier 2, annual household income between $50,000 and $100,000. At this income level, you have more capacity and more complexity to navigate. Same first step, capture the employer match. Non-negotiable. Second step, maximize the Roth IRA. At $7,000 per year, this is your most tax-efficient long-term vehicle at this income bracket. You are likely still in the 22 or 24% federal bracket, low enough that paying taxes now and protecting your future withdrawals from taxation is the superior long-term strategy. Third step, maximize the HSA. At this income level, the $4,150 individual or $8,300 family contribution is achievable, and the long-term tax-free compounding potential of this vehicle, particularly for healthcare costs in retirement, is significant. Fourth step, after Roth IRA and HSA are maximized, any additional savings goes into a taxable brokerage account invested in low-cost, broad market index funds. At this income level, a 3-fund portfolio, Total U.S. Market Index, Total International Market Index, and Total Bond Market Index, provides diversification, liquidity, and long-term performance that a typical 401k fund menu cannot match in combination. Tier 3, annual household income above $100,000. At this level, the conversation becomes more sophisticated, and the stakes of getting it wrong become more significant. Capture the employer match. Maximize the Roth IRA, but note that at income levels above approximately $146,000 for a single filer or $230,000 for a married couple, direct Roth IRA contributions are phased out. Above those thresholds, a strategy called the backdoor Roth IRA, which involves making a non-deductible traditional IRA contribution and converting it to Roth, is available. This requires precise execution and professional guidance to avoid a common tax error known as the pro rata rule. Maximize the HSA. Build the taxable brokerage account as the primary vehicle for discretionary savings beyond the tax-advantaged limits. And at income levels above $150,000, particularly for business owners, high-earning professionals, and individuals with significant long-term investable assets, a properly structured cash value life insurance policy becomes worthy of serious evaluation. Not as a replacement for the above vehicles, but as a fourth tier that adds tax-free policy loan access in retirement and provides an estate planning component that the other vehicles do not replicate. The specific structure, whether an indexed universal life policy, a whole life policy, or a hybrid, depends on your age, your health, your income trajectory, and your estate planning goals. These decisions require a qualified insurance specialist who operates as a fiduciary, not someone earning a commission on the premium volume. The distinction matters. Find the fiduciary. Let me give you the complete picture in numbers. Because I want you to leave this video with something more than a framework. I want you to leave with a visceral understanding of what the difference looks like, compounded over time. Person A follows the conventional path. They contribute $500 per month to their 401k for 30 years, in a plan with an average total expense ratio of 0.85%, invested in a diversified mix of funds with a blended return of 7% annually. At the end of 30 years, they have a balance of approximately $566,000, but the fees over that period have cost them $138,000 in lost compounding. The full balance of $566,000 is subject to ordinary income tax at withdrawal. At a 22% effective rate, the after-tax value is approximately $441,000. The money cannot be accessed without significant penalty until age 59 and a half. Person B follows the optimized path. They capture the employer match, exactly the same amount person A contributes up to the match threshold. They then redirect the remaining monthly savings across 3 vehicles, Roth IRA, HSA, and a low-cost taxable brokerage account holding index funds with expense ratios of 0.03%. The identical 7% market return applies. At the end of 30 years, the mathematical outcome is different in 3 critical ways. The Roth IRA balance, fully tax-free at withdrawal, adds substantially to their accessible wealth. The HSA balance, triple tax-advantaged, invested in low-cost funds, provides a dedicated and tax-free reserve for what will be one of their largest retirement expenses, healthcare. The taxable brokerage balance is liquid, accessible at any age, and taxed at the preferential long-term capital gains rate of 15% for most middle-income households, not the ordinary income rate that governs every 401k withdrawal. The combined accessible wealth of Person B, after tax, after fees, with full liquidity, is not just larger than Person A's number. It is substantially more flexible. Person B could access capital at 45 for a business opportunity. Person B could draw down their brokerage account in low-income years, paying 0 federal capital gains tax if they manage their income carefully. Person B's Roth IRA will never generate a required minimum distribution, which means it can compound for an additional decade or 2 beyond retirement age if other income is sufficient. The difference between these 2 people is not intelligence. It is not discipline. It is not even income. It is information. Person A was given a form on their first day of work and told to sign by Friday. Person B was given the complete picture, the history, the mathematics, the alternatives, and the architecture of how wealth actually accumulates across a lifetime. Now, there is one final number I want to leave you with. Because it is, in my view, the single most important statistic in this entire analysis. According to the Federal Reserve's most recent data, the median 401k balance for Americans approaching retirement, those aged 55 to 64, is approximately $185,000. $185,000. For someone 5 to 10 years from retirement. At a standard 4% withdrawal rate, the rule of thumb used by most financial planners to estimate sustainable retirement income from a portfolio, $185,000 generates $7,400 per year. Or $617 per month. That is not retirement security. That is a supplement to Social Security, which in 2024 pays an average monthly benefit of approximately $1,907. The average American approaching retirement has spent decades contributing to a system and emerged with a portfolio that generates $617 per month. The average American was never shown what else was possible. You have now been shown. Let me bring everything we have covered into a single, clear framework, because clarity is the thing that converts information into action. The 401k was not designed to maximize your retirement wealth. It was designed to solve a corporate tax problem in 1978 and then scaled into the default retirement vehicle for 70 million American workers. Its fee structure costs the average household over $100,000 in compounded wealth. Its lockup mechanism eliminates the liquidity that defines real financial freedom. And the tax deferral it provides is a bet on future tax rates that is becoming increasingly uncertain. This does not mean you abandon the employer match. It means you capture the match, precisely and exclusively, and then build the rest of your financial architecture using tools that offer what the 401k does not: tax-free growth, accessible capital, and the optionality that separates wealth from the appearance of wealth. The optimized sequence, by priority: capture the employer match. Stop at the threshold. Maximize the Roth IRA, the tax-free growth engine. Maximize the HSA, the triple tax advantage vehicle hiding in your benefits package. Build the taxable brokerage, the liquid foundation of deployable wealth. At higher income levels, evaluate cash value life insurance as a 4th tier. If you are self-employed, the solo 401k and the SEP IRA expand your annual tax sheltering capacity to levels that dwarf the corporate 401k. Use them. If you are 50 or older, the window has not closed. The catch-up contributions, properly deployed into the right vehicles, provide 15 years of compounding in tax-efficient structures. 15 years is not a footnote. It is a financial life. And if you are reading this in the comments section right now, tell me how much you currently have in your 401k. I will personally calculate what the fee structure in an average plan has cost you in compounded terms, and what your trajectory looks like if you redirect your strategy starting this year. I will reply to every comment in the next 24 hours. Because the whole point of understanding a system is understanding what it actually cost you, and what comes next. Now, here is what I need you to understand before this video ends. Understanding the 401k trap is only one layer of the system. Because the forces that designed the 401k did not stop there. The same structural logic, the same alignment between institutional incentives and consumer default behaviors, applies to your mortgage strategy, your insurance portfolio, your estate planning, and the way Social Security is explained to you in the years before you claim it. The next video in this series maps out the most destructive financial traps currently being set for your savings, not in theory, not abstractly, but with names, dates, and dollar amounts. I have documented 7 specific systemic mechanisms that are quietly operating on the average American household's wealth right now, and most people are not aware of a single one of them. Click to see how many your portfolio is currently exposed to. Because protecting what you have built is not the end of the work. It is the beginning.